The sun was bleeding red across the Nevada sky when Josephine Calder walked out of Del Mar. Barefoot, her wedding dress slung over her shoulder like a shroud. The white silk, once pristine and full of promise, now dragged in the dust behind her, collecting the dirt of a life she was leaving behind. She'd been abandoned at the altar of St. Mary's Church just 3 hours earlier. Thomas Whitfield, the young banker who'd courted her for 6 months with promises of a respectable life, had stood at the front of the church, his face pale as parchment when his mother whispered something in his ear. The whole congregation had watched as he turned, looked at Josephine walking down the aisle, and simply shook his head. "I cannot," he'd said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Mother has informed me of certain circumstances regarding Miss Calder's background that make this union impossible." The circumstances, as it turned out, were nothing more than the truth of her poverty. Her father had been a failed prospector who died chasing gold that never existed. Her mother had taken in washing to keep them fed. Josephine herself had worked as a seamstress since she was 14, her fingers rough from needles and thread. The Whitfields had discovered this only that morning, when someone likely Margaret Holbrook, who'd always fancied Thomas for herself, had shared the information with calculated precision. The church had erupted in whispers. Women pulled their skirts aside as Josephine stood frozen in the aisle. Men averted their eyes. The minister had cleared his throat and suggested everyone return home, given the circumstances. "Gold digger," someone had hissed as she passed. "Should have known better than to reach above her station," said another. Poor Thomas, nearly trapped by that scheming girl. Josephine had run then, straight out of the church, past the reception hall where food sat waiting for guests who would never celebrate, past her small rented room where her few belongings waited, and straight out of town. She couldn't bear to see the triumph in Margaret's eyes or the pity in others. Most of all, she couldn't bear the thought of staying in a place where her worthlessness had been proclaimed before God and everyone. The desert welcomed her with its harsh embrace. The October wind cut through her thin chemise she'd left her shawl behind in her haste. Her feet, accustomed to boots, began to blister within the first mile. Still, she walked. Each step took her farther from the shame, from the whispers, from the life she'd foolishly thought could be hers. As darkness fell, the temperature plummeted. The desert, so scorching by day, turned cruel at night. Josephine wrapped the wedding dress around her shoulders, a bitter irony not lost on her. The dress that should have marked her elevation in society now served as her only protection against the elements. She'd planned nothing, brought nothing save the clothes on her back and the dress she could no longer bear to wear. No water, no food, no destination in mind. Perhaps that was fitting. A woman with no worth deserved no future. By the time the moon rose full and bright, Josephine's steps had become stumbling. Her throat burned with thirst. Her feet left bloody prints in the sand. Coyotes called in the distance, and she wondered if being torn apart by wild animals might be more merciful than returning to civilization. It was near midnight when she saw the shadow of Red Ridge Cliff rising against the stars. She'd heard men speak of it in town, a landmark for travelers, a place where eagles nested and rattlesnakes sunned themselves on the rocks. It seemed as good a place as any to rest, or to die. She wasn't particular about which anymore. Josephine collapsed beneath an outcropping of rock, her body finally refusing to continue. The wedding dress pooled around her like spilled milk in the moonlight. Above, she could see vultures roosting, patient as undertakers. They would feast tomorrow, she thought dimly. At least someone would get use from her remains. She closed her eyes, ready to let the desert claim her. Let them find her bones bleached white as her dress. Let them say she got what she deserved for reaching too high, for believing a banker's son could love a washerwoman's daughter. But the desert had other plans. The sound of hoofbeats woke her just after dawn. Josephine tried to rise, panic flooding her exhausted body. Had they come to drag her back to parade her through town as a cautionary tale? She pressed herself against the cliff face, hoping the shadows would hide her. The rider came closer, And she could see him now, a lone man on a painted mare, moving with the easy grace of someone born to the saddle. He wore the practical clothes of a cattleman-worn leather chaps, a dust-colored shirt, a hat that had seen better decades. As he approached the cliff, he slowed, then stopped entirely. Wade Rourke had been checking on his cattle near the eastern pastures when he'd spotted what looked like a pile of white cloth at the base of Red Ridge. In these parts, white cloth meant either laundry blown off some wagon or a body. Given the vultures circling overhead, he figured it was the latter. He dismounted slowly, approaching with the caution of a man who'd seen his share of desert tragedies. But when the cloth moved, when a woman's face appeared from within the white silk, he stopped short. "Ma'am." His voice was gentle, the kind used for spooked horses. "You all right there?" Josephine tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. She shook her head, then nodded, then shook it again. Nothing about her was all right. Might never be all right again. Wade came closer, close enough for her to see his face clearly. He was perhaps 30, with the weathered features of a man who lived under the sun. His eyes were gray as storm clouds, kind but wary. When he knelt beside her, she flinched. "Please," she managed to croak. "Don't take me back. Please don't take me back to Del Mar." Something in his expression shifted. He studied her for a long moment, the ruined dress, the bloody feet, the desperation in her eyes. Then he nodded slowly. "Wasn't planning on taking you anywhere you don't want to go," he said. He unstoppered his canteen and held it to her lips. "Small sips now. Too much too fast and you'll be sick." The water was warm and tasted of metal, but Josephine had never tasted anything so sweet. She drank carefully, aware of his steady hand supporting the canteen. "Can you ride?" he asked when she'd finished. She nodded, though she wasn't sure her legs would hold her. "My place isn't far, just over that ridge and down into Promise Creek Valley. You can rest there, get your bearings." "I can't," she stopped, shame flooding her again. "I have nothing, no money, no way to repay." "Didn't ask for payment," Wade said simply. "Asked if you could ride." He helped her to her feet with a gentleness that brought tears to her eyes. When her knees buckled, he steadied her without comment. The wedding dress tangled around her legs, and she looked at it with such hatred that Wade asked, "You want to leave that behind?" "No," she said fiercely. "It's all I have left." He didn't question this, just helped her onto his mare and swung up behind her. His arm came around her waist to hold the reins, solid and impersonal as a fence post. "Name's Wade Rourke," he said as they began to move. "Been running cattle out here for 8 years now." "Josephine Calder," she whispered, then wondered if she should have lied. But what was the point? She had nothing left to protect. "Well, Miss Calder," Wade said, "whatever you're running from, it must have been mighty bad to send you into the desert with no water." She waited for more questions, for demands for explanation, but they never came. Wade Rourke simply guided his horse toward home, a stranger's body trembling against his chest, and asked for nothing more than her name. As they rode, Josephine caught glimpses of the life she was entering: scattered cattle grazing on sparse grass, a hawk circling overhead, the distant smudge of smoke that might be a chimney. It was a hard land, unforgiving as the town she'd left behind. But there was something clean about its harshness, something honest. "Nobody has the right to make you feel small," Wade said suddenly, as if continuing a conversation they hadn't started. "Whatever they did to you back there, whatever they said, that's on them, not you." Josephine closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her like the water had. She didn't believe them, not yet, but for the first time since Thomas had shaken his head in that church. She thought perhaps someday she might. The sun climbed higher, baking the desert into shimmering waves. Behind them, her bloody footprints had already been covered by the wind. Ahead, Promise Creek waited with whatever salvation or damnation it might offer. And wrapped in the ruins of her wedding dress, held steady by a stranger's careful arm, Josephine Calder rode toward a future she hadn't planned and wasn't sure she deserved. But she rode toward it all the same. The ranch appeared like a mirage through the heat waves, a modest wooden house with a wraparound porch, a barn weathered to silver gray, and a corral where several horses dozed in the afternoon sun. It wasn't grand. Nothing like the banker's mansion Thomas had promised her, but it looked solid and real in a way that made Josephine's throat tight with unexpected emotion. Wade guided his mare through the gate, and a spotted dog came running, tail wagging. "That's Blue," he said. "Don't let the name fool you. He's mostly useless except for eating scraps and warming feet on cold nights." The normalcy of his tone, the easy way he spoke as if she were just any visitor and not a half-dead woman in a ruined wedding dress, made Josephine relax fractionally against him. "You live here alone?" she asked, then immediately regretted the question. It sounded too forward, too interested. "Mostly," Wade replied, dismounting first and then helping her down. Her legs buckled immediately, and he caught her elbow. "Got a hand who comes by during branding season, and old Miguel checks on things when I'm moving cattle to market. But day to day, it's just me and Blue and whatever horses aren't too ornery to stick around." He led her toward the house, but Josephine stopped at the porch steps. The shame that had driven her into the desert returned full force. She was filthy, bloodied, wearing the dress that marked her as a rejected woman. How could she enter any decent person's home like this? "I can't," she said. I'll dirty everything. If you have a barn, I could—" Wade turned to look at her, those storm-gray eyes steady. "You planning on being my livestock, Miss Calder?" "No, but—" "Then you'll come inside like a person." His tone was mild, but firm. "There's a wash basin and some clean clothes that might fit. Belonged to my sister. She left them behind when she married and moved to California." Josephine wanted to protest further, but her body betrayed her. The promise of cleanliness, of washing the dust and shame from her skin, was too powerful to resist. The inside of the house was sparse but clean. A main room served as kitchen and living space, with a stone fireplace and a table made from rough planks. Through one door she glimpsed a bedroom. Through another, what might be a storage room. Wade poured water from a pitcher into a ceramic basin and set it on the table. From a trunk in the corner, he produced a simple calico dress, faded but clean, and some undergarments. "I'll be seeing to the horses," he said. "Take your time." When the door closed behind him, Josephine stood frozen for a moment. The kindness felt dangerous, like a trap waiting to spring. In her experience, men didn't help women without expecting payment of some kind. But her body's needs overrode her suspicion. She peeled off the chemise stiff with sweat and dust, used the cloth Wade had left to wash herself as best she could. The water turned pink with blood from her feet, gray with dirt from the desert. When she was clean, she held up the calico dress, a simple thing with small blue flowers. It smelled of lavender sachets and distant memories. The dress fit well enough, though loose in the bodice. Wade's sister must have been a larger woman. Josephine found herself wondering about this sister. What kind of person would leave clothes behind when starting a new life? Perhaps someone who wanted to forget who she'd been before. She folded the wedding dress carefully, though she couldn't say why. The silk was ruined, torn and stained beyond repair. Still, her hands smoothed the fabric as if it were precious. When Wade returned, he carried a bowl of something that smelled like heaven. "Beef stew," he said, setting it before her. "Nothing fancy, but it'll put something in your stomach." Josephine ate slowly, aware of him moving around the kitchen, stoking the stove, washing his own hands. He didn't watch her eat, didn't hover or ask questions. The domesticity of it, the quiet clink of spoons, the dog settling by the door made her eyes burn with unshed tears. "Thank you," she said when the bowl was empty. Wade nodded, refilling her water cup. "You planning on telling me what sent you into the desert to die?" The blunt question should have offended her, but somehow it didn't. There was no judgment in his tone, just practical curiosity. "I wasn't worth what he thought I was," she said simply. "His family found out my father died poor, that my mother took in washing. They stopped the wedding, called me a gold digger, said I was trying to trap him." She laughed bitterly. "As if love had nothing to do with it." "Did it?" Wade asked. "Love, I mean." Josephine considered this. "I thought so. He was handsome, educated. He brought me books, told me I was clever enough to learn anything." She shook her head. "But I loved what I thought he was offering more. A chance to be respectable, to walk into shops without people whispering about the washwoman's daughter. And when that was taken away, you figured you'd rather die than go back to being her." The accuracy of it stung. "Yes." Wade leaned back in his chair, studying her with those calm gray eyes. "My father was a drunk," he said conversationally. "Lost our farm in Missouri to whiskey and bad cards. Mother died of shame. Or at least that's what the church ladies said. Truth was, she died of consumption. But shame makes a better story." Josephine blinked at the unexpected confession. "Came out here with nothing but a horse and a bedroll." Wade continued. "Worked other men's cattle for 5 years before I saved enough for this place. Small as it is, it's mine free and clear. Built it board by board. Earned it with my own sweat." He paused. "What I'm saying is, Miss Calder, there's no shame in coming from nothing. Only shame is in being nothing. And from where I sit, you don't strike me as nothing." The tears came then, silent but unstoppable. Wade pushed a handkerchief across the table and went back to cleaning dishes as if women wept in his kitchen every day. When she'd composed herself, Josephine asked, "What happens now?" "Now you rest," Wade said. "Tomorrow we'll see about those feet of yours. They need proper tending. After that," he shrugged, "after that is up to you. You want to move on. I'll take you to the stage station. You want to stay a spell, figure things out. There's the storage room. Got a cot in there from when Miguel's grandson stayed one summer. I can't pay." "Can you cook?" "Yes." "Can you mend?" "I'm a seamstress by trade, or was." "Then you can pay," Wade said. "This place hasn't seen a woman's touch since my sister left. Shirts need mending. Curtains are more whole than fabric. You fix those things. We'll call it even." It was too easy, too generous. "Why?" Josephine asked. "Why would you help me?" Wade was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window where the sun was beginning to sink toward the mountains. "Maybe because I know what it's like to run from a life that's killing you. Maybe because turning away someone in need ain't the kind of man I want to be." He turned back to her. "Or maybe just because it's Tuesday, and I've got the room." That night, Josephine lay on the narrow cot in the storage room, surrounded by the smell of leather and grain. Her feet throbbed despite the salve Wade had applied with careful, impersonal hands. Through the thin walls, she could hear him moving about, the low murmur of his voice as he talked to the dog. She'd expected to lie awake, tormented by memories of her humiliation. Instead, exhaustion pulled her under like deep water. Her last thought before sleep was of Wade's hands, gentle on her ruined feet, and his matter-of-fact voice. "There's no shame in coming from nothing." For the first time in months, maybe years, Josephine Calder slept without dreams of becoming someone else, in a storage room that smelled of grain, in a borrowed dress with small blue flowers. She simply slept, and that, perhaps, was its own kind of salvation. The morning came with the crow of a rooster and the smell of coffee brewing. Josephine woke disoriented, her body stiff from the cot, her feet burning with yesterday's wounds. For a moment, she couldn't place the wooden rafters above her, the horse blanket covering her. Then memory flooded back the wedding, the desert. Wade Rourke's steady hands helping her from his horse. She rose carefully, testing her weight on her bandaged feet. They held, though each step sent sharp reminders of her desperate flight. The calico dress hung on a nail, and she dressed quickly. fingers fumbling with buttons that weren't silk-covered pearls. In the main room, Wade stood at the stove, his back to her. He'd already been out. His boots carried the dust of morning chores, and fresh eggs sat in a basket on the table. "Coffee?" he asked without turning. "Please." He poured 2 cups, black and strong enough to strip paint. "How are the feet?" "Sore but healing." "Good." He set a plate before her: eggs, cornbread, a slice of salt pork. "Eat up, then we'll change those bandages." The domesticity of it made her throat tight. Here was a stranger treating her with more consideration than Thomas had shown in 6 months of courtship. After breakfast, Wade brought fresh bandages and the salve. Josephine sat on a chair, embarrassed as he knelt to unwrap her feet. The wounds looked angry but clean. "You're lucky," he said, applying salve with gentle efficiency. "No infection. Few more days and you'll be walking proper again." "I should," Josephine started, then stopped. Should what? Leave? She had nowhere to go. Stay. She had no right. "You should heal," Wade said firmly. "Rest is what you should do." But Josephine had never been one for idleness. By noon, she was examining the pile of mending Wade had mentioned. Shirts with tears from barbed wire, trousers worn thin at the knees, a jacket missing half its buttons. She found his sister's sewing basket, still stocked with thread and needles, and set to work. The rhythm of sewing soothed her: needle in, needle out, pulling fabric together, making something whole from something torn. Her mother had taught her these stitches when she was barely tall enough to reach the table. "Good, honest work," her mother had said. "No shame in keeping folks clothed." Wade came and went throughout the day, checking cattle, mending fence. Each time he entered, he'd nod at her progress, sometimes bringing water or asking if she needed anything. He moved around her carefully, as if she were a wild creature that might spook. By evening, she'd mended 3 shirts and started on the trousers. Wade stood in the doorway, looking at the neat pile of repaired clothing with something like wonder. "Haven't seen stitches that fine since my mother was alive," he said. "It's the least I can do," Josephine replied, not looking up from her work. "It's plenty." He paused. "There's something I should tell you. Tomorrow's Saturday. I usually ride into Promise Creek for supplies. You're welcome to come, but—" He trailed off, and she understood. But people would talk, but she might be recognized. But her presence would raise questions. "I'll stay here," she said quickly. Wade nodded, though something in his expression suggested he wasn't entirely pleased with her answer. That night after supper, a simple meal of beans and cornbread that somehow tasted better than any fancy dinner in Del Mar, Josephine found herself settling into an unexpected routine. She cleaned the dishes while Wade tended to the evening chores. When he returned, they sat on the porch, watching the sun paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. "You don't have to hide forever," Wade said eventually. "I'm not hiding," Josephine protested. "I'm just not ready." "For what?" She considered this. "For people to look at me and see what I am." "And what's that?" A woman who reached above her station, who thought she could be more than a washwoman's daughter. Wade was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Funny thing about this country. Out here, stations don't mean much. Man could be born in a palace or a pig pen. What matters is what he does when the sun comes up." "It's different for women," Josephine said softly. "Maybe," Wade conceded. "But hiding won't change that." The next morning, Josephine watched from the window as Wade hitched his wagon and headed for town. The ranch felt different without him, larger, emptier. She threw herself into cleaning, scrubbing floors that were already clean, washing windows that barely had dust. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from wandering to what folks in Promise Creek might say when they saw Wade Rourke buying fabric and women's necessities. She found his sister's things in the storage room, not just clothes, but books, a silver brush, a small mirror, At the bottom of the trunk was a daguerreotype of a young woman who shared Wade's strong jaw and direct gaze. On the back, in fading ink, Catherine Rourke, age 22, bound for California, and a new life. A new life. Josephine traced the words with one finger. How easy it sounded. How impossible it seemed. When Wade's wagon rumbled back into view late afternoon, Josephine felt a relief she didn't want to examine too closely. He brought supplies, flour, coffee, salt pork, but also packages wrapped in brown paper. "Mrs. Henley at the general store said these might fit," he said, awkward as she'd ever seen him. Inside were 2 simple dresses, undergarments, and a pair of sturdy boots. "Can't have you wearing Catherine's things forever. She'd haunt me for sure." Josephine's eyes burned. "I can't accept—" "You can and you will." Wade interrupted. "Call it advance payment for all the mending. Lord knows I've got enough to keep you busy till Christmas." That night, she tried on one of the new dresses, brown wool, practical and well-made. It fit properly. And looking at herself in Catherine's small mirror, Josephine almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. Gone was the desperate bride in silk. In her place stood someone plainer, but somehow more real. "Thank you," she told Wade at supper. "For the clothes. For everything." He shifted uncomfortably. "No need for thanks, just being neighborly." But it was more than that, and they both knew it. There was nothing neighborly about the way he'd held her on that horse, careful not to touch more than necessary. Nothing neighborly about how he knocked before entering any room she was in, or how he'd bought her things without making her feel like charity. That night, unable to sleep, Josephine wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped onto the porch. The desert stretched endless under a blanket of stars, and she thought about all the women who'd stood on porches like this, looking out at lives they hadn't planned. "Can't sleep." She startled. Wade sat in the shadows, a cup of coffee cooling in his hands. "Too much quiet," she admitted. In town, there was always noise wagons, people, dogs barking. "You'll get used to it, or you won't, and you'll move on." His tone was neutral, but something in it made her look at him more closely. "Do you want me to move on?" "I want you to do what makes you happy," Wade said carefully. "Or at least, what makes you less unhappy." "What if I don't know what that is?" "Then I reckon you stay until you figure it out." They sat in comfortable silence. 2 people who'd been broken by life in different ways, finding an unexpected peace in each other's company. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human suffering and human kindness alike. "I'm not a good woman," Josephine said suddenly. "I wanted to marry Thomas for his money as much as for love, maybe more." "Doesn't make you bad," Wade replied. "Makes you practical. Man offers you a better life. Why shouldn't you want it?" "Because good women are supposed to marry for love alone." Wade snorted. "Good women according to who folks who never had to choose between love and eating." He set down his coffee cup with a decisive clink. "You know what I think? I think good has nothing to do with what you want and everything to do with what you do. And what you've done is work honest. Treat folks fair, and try to build something better. That's good enough for me." Josephine felt tears threaten again. When had she become so weepy? But Wade's words struck something deep, a wound she hadn't known needed tending. "I should go in," she said. "Sleep well, Miss Calder." She paused at the door. "Josephine," she said. "Just Josephine." "Josephine," he repeated, and her name in his mouth sounded like a promise of something she couldn't yet name. 2 weeks passed in a rhythm of simple tasks and quiet companionship. Josephine's feet healed, leaving only faint scars as reminders of her desperate flight. She took over the cooking, discovering Wade had been living on beans and cornbread more often than not. The first time she made a proper stew with vegetables from the small garden out back. He looked at her like she'd performed a miracle. "I'd forgotten food could taste like something other than survival," he said, accepting a second helping. "It's just stew," Josephine protested, but she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the stove. She'd found her place in the rhythm of ranch life, cooking, mending, tending the garden, feeding the chickens Wade had bought on his last trip to town. The work was hard but satisfying. Each task completed a small victory against the voice in her head that still whispered she was worthless. It was the third Saturday when Wade asked again, "You coming to town?" Josephine's hands stilled over the shirt she was patching. She'd run out of excuses, and they both knew it. Her feet were healed. She had proper clothes. The only thing keeping her at the ranch was fear. "What will people say?" she asked quietly. "Don't rightly care what they say," Wade replied. "But if you're asking what they'll think I've hired help, which is true enough." It wasn't the whole truth, and they both knew that too. No hired help ate at the same table as the owner, or sat on the porch in the evenings discussing books from Catherine's small library. But the fiction might be enough to protect them both from questions neither wanted to answer. "All right," Josephine heard herself say. "I'll come." The ride to Promise Creek took 2 hours over rutted roads. Josephine sat beside Wade on the wagon seat, acutely aware of every inch between them. She'd styled her hair in a simple bun, worn the brown wool dress that made her look respectable if plain. The transformation from desperate bride to ranch woman was complete, at least on the outside. Promise Creek was smaller than Del Mar, but somehow felt more alive. The main street bustled with Saturday activity ranchers loading supplies, women examining fabric at the general store, children darting between wagons like small fish. Nobody looked twice at Wade's wagon until they noticed his passenger. "That's Jake Morrison," Wade said quietly, nodding toward a man loading feed sacks. "Runs cattle south of here. The woman by the store is Mrs. Henley. She owns it with her husband. Good people, both of them." He was giving her armor, Josephine realized. Names and details to make these strangers less frightening. At the general store, Wade helped her down from the wagon. His hand at her elbow was steady, proprietary in a way that sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach. Mrs. Henley," he said as they entered. "This is Miss Calder. She's helping out at the ranch with cooking and such." Mrs. Henley was a plump woman with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. She took in Josephine's neat appearance, the careful distance between her and Wade, the way Josephine's hands twisted slightly in her skirts. "Welcome to Promise Creek, Miss Calder," she said warmly. "Always good to see another woman in these parts. Lord knows we're outnumbered something fierce." "Thank you, ma'am," Josephine managed. "What brings you out our way, if you don't mind my asking?" Here it was the question Josephine had dreaded, but before she could stammer out a lie, Wade spoke. "Miss Calder's a seamstress by trade," he said easily. "Best mending I've ever seen. Figured I'd mention it, case anyone needs such work done." Mrs. Henley's eyes lit up. "A real seamstress. Oh, my dear, you're about to become the most popular woman in town. Half the ladies here can barely thread a needle, and the other half are too busy to bother." She leaned closer conspiratorially. "Including me. I've got a dress that needs taking and lost some weight this summer. Would you consider it?" Yes, of course," Josephine said, stunned by the sudden shift from interrogation to employment opportunity. "Wonderful, bring it by the ranch next week," Wade said, smoothly taking charge. "Miss Calder can look it over." As they moved through the store, gathering supplies, Josephine noticed how Wade's presence seemed to shield her. His solid reputation as a dependable rancher extended to cover her, the unknown woman at his side. There were curious looks, certainly, but no hostile whispers like those that had driven her from Del Mar. "You all right?" Wade asked quietly as he loaded a sack of flour into the wagon. "Yes," Josephine said, and found she meant it. They were preparing to leave when a commotion erupted near the bank. A woman's scream, followed by shouts. People rushed toward the sound, and Josephine saw a small crowd gathering around someone on the ground. "That's the Garrett boy," someone said. "Horse through him?" Wade was moving before the words finished. and Josephine found herself following. Through the crowd, she could see a boy of maybe 12, his leg bent at an unnatural angle, his face white with pain and fear. "Someone fetch Doc Murphy," a man called. "Doc's out at the Sawyer place," another replied. "Won't be back till evening." The boy's mother knelt beside him, tears streaming. "Please," she begged the crowd. "Someone help him." Josephine pushed forward without thinking. "Let me see," she said, her voice carrying an authority she didn't know she possessed. "Miss, I don't think someone started. My mother was a midwife," Josephine said, which was true. "She taught me about bones and healing, also true, though she'd never dealt with anything this serious. But the boy's face was gray now, his breathing shallow, and waiting for the doctor might mean permanent damage. She knelt beside him, hands gentle as she examined the break. "It's clean," she announced with relief. "No bone through skin, but it needs setting now." "You know how?" the mother asked desperately. Josephine met her eyes. "Yes, but it will hurt him." "Do it," the woman said. "I need straight boards for splints," Josephine ordered, "and strips of cloth for binding. Someone give me your flask, the boy needs something for the pain." The crowd, grateful for direction, scattered to gather supplies. Wade appeared at her shoulder. "You sure about this?" "No," she admitted quietly. "But I can't do nothing." He squeezed her shoulder briefly. "Tell me what you need." With Wade's help, she gave the boy a sip of whiskey, just enough to dull the edge. Then, with the mother holding her son's shoulders and Wade steadying the leg above the break, Josephine set the bone. The boy screamed once, mercifully brief, then fainted. "It's better he's unconscious," Josephine said, working quickly to splint and bind the leg. Her hands were steady, remembering her mother's teachings, the few times she'd helped with injuries in their poor neighborhood. When she finished, the boy's color was already better. His breathing had steadied. "He needs to stay still," she instructed the mother. "Keep the leg elevated. When Doc Murphy returns, have him check my work, but I believe it will heal clean if you're careful." "Thank you," the woman sobbed, clutching Josephine's hands. "Thank you, Miss... What's your name?" "Josephine Calder," she said, and for the first time since fleeing Del Mar, she spoke her name without shame. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Josephine's hands trembled now that the crisis had passed, reaction setting in. "That was well done," Wade said finally. "I was terrified," she admitted. "Didn't show. You looked like you'd been setting bones your whole life." "My mother would have done better." "Your mother isn't here. That boy's lucky you were." They rode in silence for a while. Then Wade spoke again. "Word will spread about what you did, Mrs. Garrett's got a tongue like a church bell. Everyone in 3 counties will know by week's end." "Is that bad?" "Opposite. You're not just the woman staying at Wade Rourke's ranch now. You're the woman who saved the Garrett boy's leg. That carries weight in a place like this." Josephine considered this. In Del Mar, she'd been defined by what she lacked: proper breeding, sufficient wealth, the right connections. Here, it seemed, she might be defined by what she could do. "Wade," she said as the ranch came into view. "Thank you, for today, for making it easier. Didn't do anything but drive the wagon." "You know that's not true." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "You're welcome, Josephine." That evening, as she prepared supper, Josephine found herself humming something she hadn't done since her mother died. The sound surprised her, but she didn't stop. Outside the window, Wade worked with a young horse, his movements patient and sure. Blue lay in the dust nearby, occasionally thumping his tail. It wasn't the life she'd imagined. There was no fine house, no servants, no silk dresses or social calls. Instead, there was good work and plain food, and a man who'd given her dignity along with shelter. There was a town that might accept her for her skills rather than reject her for her birth. "You hungry?" she called from the doorway. Wade looked up, a smile crossing his weathered face. "Always am when you're cooking." As he walked toward the house, Josephine felt something shift inside her chest. Not love, it was too soon, too complicated for that. But perhaps the possibility of it. Perhaps the hope that she could build something here not because she was settling for less, but because she was discovering what truly mattered. The sun set over Promise Creek, painting the desert in shades of gold and possibility. And Josephine Calder, seamstress and bone setter, ranch cook and mender of shirts, stood in the doorway of a house that wasn't hers and felt, for the first time in her life, like she was exactly where she belonged. Word of Josephine's skill spread through Promise Creek like wildfire through dry grass. Within days, Mrs. Henley arrived with not one but 3 dresses needing alteration. The banker's wife, Mrs. Pemberton, followed with a torn Sunday dress. Even gruff Mrs. Morrison, who ran the boarding house, brought a pile of tablecloths that needed mending. "Haven't had proper seamstress work in 2 years, Mrs. Morrison declared, examining Josephine's neat stitches with approval. "Last one married a railroad man and moved to Sacramento." Josephine worked at the kitchen table, fabric spread before her, while life on the ranch continued around her. Wade came and went, always with a nod or a quiet word. Sometimes she'd look up to find him watching her work, something soft in his gray eyes that made her heart skip. The earnings from her sewing went into a jar on the shelf. "For when you're ready to move on," Wade had said when she tried to give him the money for room and board. But Josephine found herself less and less inclined to think about leaving. It was a Tuesday afternoon when young Sam Garrett appeared at the ranch, walking carefully with a stick, but walking nonetheless. His mother followed in their wagon. "Miss Josephine," the boy called out, proud as a rooster. "Look, Doc Murphy said you said it perfect. Said I'd have been crippled sure if you hadn't acted fast." Josephine came out, wiping flour from her hands. She'd been making bread. The sight of the boy on his feet made her throat tight with emotion. "I'm glad you're healing well, Sam," she said. "Mrs." Garrett climbed down from the wagon, pressing a bundle into Josephine's hands. "It's not much," she said, "but I wanted you to have this, made it myself." Inside was a quilt, beautifully pieced in blues and creams. "Mrs. Garrett, I can't." "You can and you will," the woman said firmly. "You gave me back my boy whole. That's worth more than any quilt." After they left, Josephine sat on the porch holding the quilt, tears rolling down her cheeks. Wade found her there when he came in from checking the cattle. "What's wrong?" He was beside her instantly, concern creasing his face. "Nothing's wrong," she managed. "Everything's right. Too right. I don't deserve—" "Stop." His voice was gentle but firm. "You've got to quit deciding what you deserve and start accepting what you've earned." She looked at him then, really looked, saw the kindness in his weathered face, the steadiness in his hands, the way he'd created space for her to heal and grow without asking for anything in return. "Why are you so good to me?" she whispered. Wade was quiet for a moment, then sat beside her on the step, careful to leave proper distance between them. "My mother used to say that kindness costs nothing but pays everything." Never found reason to doubt her wisdom. "That's not an answer?" "Maybe not the one you're looking for." He paused, seeming to wrestle with words. "Truth is, Josephine, this place has been empty a long time. Not just of people, but of purpose. I suppose, watching you find your feet again. Seeing you help folks, it reminds me there's more to life than just surviving another season." The admission hung between them, delicate as morning frost. Josephine clutched the quilt tighter, afraid to speak and break whatever was building. "I should check on supper," she said finally. "Josephine," her name on his lips stopped her. "I'm glad you stayed." "So am I," she admitted, and fled inside before she could say more. That night, she spread Mrs. Garrett's quilt on her narrow cot and thought about belonging in Delmar. She'd tried to earn it through marriage, through climbing to a social position that would make her acceptable. Here, she was earning it through work, through service, through being useful to people who needed her skills. But there was more. There was the way children now waved when she went to town, the way Mrs. Henley had invited her to join the church quilting circle, the way even taciturn Mr. Pemberton tipped his hat when he saw her. And there was Wade. Steady, kind Wade, who asked for nothing but gave so much, who looked at her like she was already everything she needed to be. The next morning brought the first real cold of autumn. Josephine woke to find frost on the windows and her breath misting in the air. She dressed quickly and hurried to start the stove. Wade was already up, adding wood to the fireplace. "Winter's coming early," he said. "Need to get the last of the hay in before it snows." "I'll help," Josephine offered. "It's hard work." "I'm not afraid of hard work." He smiled then, that slow smile that transformed his serious face. "No, I don't believe you are." They worked side by side in the fields, Josephine learning to handle a pitchfork, to stack hay so it would shed water, to read the sky for signs of weather. Her hands blistered despite the gloves Wade had given her, but she didn't complain. There was something deeply satisfying about the physical labor, about preparing for winter together. "You're different," Wade said during a water break. "Different how?" "Than when you first came. You were like a bird with broken wings, all folded in on yourself. Now," he gestured at her, standing strong despite her exhaustion. "Now you stand like you've got a right to the ground under your feet." "Maybe I'm starting to believe I do." "Good. About time." They were storing the last load when the accident happened. Wade was in the loft, arranging bales, when a rotten board gave way. Josephine heard the crack, his sharp curse, then the terrible thud as he hit the barn floor. "Wade!" She was beside him in an instant. He lay still, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. His right arm bent wrong. "Don't move," she ordered when he groaned and tried to sit up. Her hands were steady as she examined him, all those lessons from her mother flooding back. The arm was dislocated, not broken painful, but fixable. The head wound was shallow, though head wounds always bled fierce. "Need to set your shoulder," she said. "It's going to hurt." "Do it," he gritted out. She'd seen her mother do this once. Josephine braced her foot against his ribs, took his arm firmly, and pulled with a swift, smooth motion. The joint slipped back into place with an audible pop. Wade's face went white, but he didn't cry out. "Brave man," she murmured, tearing strips from her petticoat to bind the arm and clean the head wound. "Learned from a brave woman." He managed. She got him inside, settled in his bed with his arm in a sling. For the first time, she was in his room, a simple space with a narrow bed, a dresser, and surprisingly, a shelf of books. "You need to rest," she said. "No arguing." "Wasn't going to argue." His eyes were heavy. "Feel like I got kicked by a mule." "Close enough." She pulled the blanket up to his chest, then hesitated. "Wade, what you said about me being different, you're different too, from any man I've known." "How's that?" "You see me, not what I could be or should be or failed to be, just me." His good hand found hers. "That's all I ever wanted to see." Josephine stayed with him through the night, dozing in the chair beside his bed, waking whenever he stirred. By morning, his color was better, though he groaned when he tried to move. "You're worse than a mother hen," he complained when she insisted he stay in bed. "And you're worse than a stubborn mule," she retorted. "The hay can wait. Your health can't." It was strange, the reversal of their roles. Now Wade was the one needing care, and Josephine was the one providing it. She managed the ranch chores clumsily but determinedly, fed the animals, kept the fires going. In between, she sat with Wade, reading from his books, talking about everything and nothing. "You don't have to fuss," he said the third day, when she brought him soup for lunch. "I want to," She adjusted his pillows, her hands gentle. You gave me a place to heal. Least I can do is return the favor. Josephine. His voice stopped her at the door. What happens when I'm healed? You planning to move on then? The question she'd been avoiding hung in the air between them. Do you want me to? She asked softly. No. The word came quick and sure. No, I don't want you to go, but I can't ask you to stay either. Wouldn't be fair. Why not? He struggled to sit up straighter. Because you deserve more than a small ranch and a broken-down cowboy. You deserve the life you were reaching for in Del Mar: comfort, respectability, security. Josephine crossed the room and sat on the edge of his bed. Propriety be damned. What if I told you I found more respectability here, mending clothes and setting bones and making soup, than I ever found trying to marry above my station? What if I said security isn't about money in the bank, but about knowing someone will stand steady beside you? I'd say you're seeing things clear for the first time. Then maybe you should trust my vision. Wade's good hand reached up to touch her cheek, rough fingers impossibly gentle. Josephine Calder, you're about the finest thing that ever walked into my life. Just walked, she teased, though her voice shook. Seems to me I was carried. Details, he murmured, and something in his eyes made her lean closer. But before anything could happen, Blue started barking outside, announcing a visitor. Josephine sprang back, face flushed. As Mrs. Henley's voice called from the yard. Just checking on you folks. Heard Wade took a tumble. The moment was broken, but something had shifted between them. As Josephine went to greet their visitor, she felt Wade's eyes follow her, warm with promise and possibility. Wade's recovery was swift, much to his own impatience. Within a week he was up and moving, though Josephine insisted he keep the sling for his shoulder. She'd taken over the ranch operations with surprising efficiency, learning from necessity what usually took years to master. You're a natural rancher, Wade said one morning, watching her expertly separate the chickens that had been pecking at each other. I'm a desperate rancher, she corrected, wiping sweat from her brow. There's a difference. But she was smiling, and Wade noticed she'd taken to wearing her hair in a long braid like the ranch women did. Practical and pretty both. It was the second week of his recovery when the past caught up with them. Josephine was in town collecting supplies and delivering mending to Mrs. Morrison when she heard the voice that froze her blood. I heard tell there was a woman here. Goes by Calder. Where might I find her? She turned slowly, her worst fears confirmed. Marcus Whitfield, Thomas's older brother, stood at the general store counter. He was exactly as she remembered, tall, coldly handsome, with eyes like chips of ice. Mrs. Henley, bless her, didn't immediately answer. Lots of folks pass through Promise Creek. Mr. Whitfield, Marcus Whitfield of Del Mar. This woman Josephine Calder she stole from my family. I'm here to see justice done. The lie hit Josephine like a physical blow. She stepped from behind the fabric display where she'd been examining cloth. I stole nothing, she said, her voice steadier than her hands. Marcus's eyes found her, and his smile was sharp as glass. Miss Calder, how convenient. You took a wedding dress that was paid for by the Whitfield family. That makes you a thief. A dress meant for a wedding that your family canceled, Josephine shot back, after humiliating me before the entire town. Nevertheless, the dress wasn't yours to take. A crowd was gathering, drawn by the drama. Josephine saw familiar faces. Mrs. Morrison, Jake Garrett, the minister's wife. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to concern. How much? She asked suddenly. I beg your pardon. The dress. How much did it cost? I'll pay for it. Marcus named a sum that made several people gasp. It was more than Josephine could make in 6 months of sewing. You can't possibly, he started. I'll pay it, a deep voice said from the doorway. Wade stood there, still favoring his injured arm, but solid as an oak tree. He walked to Josephine's side, his presence warm and protective. Mr. Rourke, Marcus said, his tone dismissive. This doesn't concern you. Anything concerning Miss Calder concerns me, Wade said simply. Name your bank. I'll wire the money tomorrow. Wade, no, Josephine protested. It's too much. It's settled, he said firmly. Then turned back to Marcus. Once that's done, I don't expect to see you in Promise Creek again. Miss Calder is under my protection here. Your protection? Marcus's smile turned knowing. I see. Thomas always said she was clever. Found herself another man to keep her. Did she? The insult hung in the air like smoke from a badly drawn fire. Josephine felt the familiar shame rising, the old wounds tearing open. But before she could respond, Mrs. Henley spoke up. Mr. Whitfield, I'll ask you to watch your tongue. Miss Calder is a respected member of our community. She saved the Garrett boy's leg, helps anyone who needs mending, and works honest as any woman I know. That's right, Mrs., Morrison added, stepping forward. Whatever happened in Delmare is Delmare's business. Here, we judge folks by their actions, not their past. One by one, others spoke up. Jake Garrett talked about Josephine's quick thinking with his son. The minister's wife mentioned her help with the church bazaar. Even gruff Mr. Pemberton noted that she'd never overcharged for her work. Marcus looked around at the united front, his confident smile faltering. I see she's fooled you all. Very well. I'll expect that payment. Mr. Rourke, in full. You'll get it, Wade said. Marcus left, but not before throwing one last poisonous look at Josephine. You can't run from what you are, he said quietly, meant for her ears alone. After he was gone, the crowd dispersed slowly, people stopping to pat Josephine's shoulder or murmur support. When they were alone, Josephine turned to Wade. I can't let you pay that. It's everything you have saved. How do you know what I have saved? Because I do your books now. Remember, Wade? That money is for buying more cattle, for expanding the ranch. None of that matters if you leave because of him. Wade's voice was rough. Is that what you're planning to run again? Josephine looked at him. This good man who'd literally pay a fortune to keep her safe, who'd stood before the town and claimed her as worth protecting. I was, she admitted. When I saw Marcus, all I could think was how I'd brought shame to your door, how everyone would know what I am now. And what are you? A woman who tried to marry above her station, who took something that wasn't hers, who survived. Wade interrupted. Who walked out of a bad situation with her head high, who came here and made herself useful, made herself needed, who made herself loved. The last word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Wade. I love you, Josephine. The words came simple and direct, like everything about him. Been fighting it since the day I found you, telling myself you'd move on when you were ready. But seeing that man try to tear you down, watching you stand there ready to run, I can't let you go without saying it. Josephine's eyes filled with tears. I'm not worth your savings. I'm not worth... You're worth everything, Wade said fiercely. But it's not about worth. It's about choice. I choose you, Josephine Calder. Question is, what do you choose? Before she could answer, a commotion arose from down the street. Sam Garrett came running, his healed leg only slightly slowing him down. Miss Josephine, Mr. Wade fire at the Morrison place. They need help. The conversation abandoned. They ran toward the boarding house where smoke was already visible. The next hour was a blur of bucket brigades and shouted orders. Josephine found herself working alongside the other women, passing water, helping evacuate boarders, her dress soaked and singed. When the fire was finally out, half the boarding house was destroyed. Mrs. Morrison sat in the street, staring at the ruins of her livelihood. 20 years, she said numbly. 20 years of work. Gone. Without thinking, Josephine knelt beside her. We'll help you rebuild, she said. All of us will help. With what money, Mrs.? Morrison laughed bitterly. I'm ruined. That night, back at the ranch, Josephine made a decision. She found Wade on the porch, staring out at the stars. Don't pay Marcus, she said. Josephine. Listen, that money, use it to help Mrs. Morrison rebuild. The town needs that boarding house. She needs her livelihood. And when Marcus comes back, when he has you arrested? Josephine took a breath. Then I'll face it, but I won't let you beggar yourself for my pride, and I won't stand by while Mrs. Morrison loses everything when we could help. Wade studied her in the moonlight. You sure? No, she admitted. I'm terrified. But I'm also tired of running, tired of being ashamed. If the town stands by me, then I'll stand too. And if they don't, then at least I'll have tried to do the right thing. Wade stood and pulled her into his arms. Propriety forgotten. You're the bravest woman I know, he murmured into her hair. I'm the most frightened woman you know, she corrected. But maybe that's what courage is, being frightened and standing anyway. They stood together in the darkness, holding each other, while overhead the stars wheeled on, indifferent to human struggles but somehow blessing them all the same. The next morning, Wade went to town not to wire money to Marcus Whitfield, but to organize the rebuilding of Morrison's boarding house. Josephine went with him, head high despite the fear still coiled in her stomach. Marcus had given them 3 days to send the money, 3 days to see if Promise Creek would truly stand by one of their own, 3 days to discover if Josephine Calder had finally found a place where her worth wasn't measured in money or birthright, but in the strength of her heart and the work of her hands. The 3 days passed in a whirlwind of activity. The entire town of Promise Creek rallied to help Mrs. Morrison, with Wade organizing work crews and Josephine coordinating the women who provided meals for the workers. But beneath the bustle of rebuilding, tension simmered. Everyone knew Marcus Whitfield's deadline approached. On the second night, Josephine couldn't sleep. She found herself in the kitchen at midnight, kneading bread dough with unnecessary force. That dough do something to offend you? Wade asked from the doorway. I'm sorry, did I wake you? No, haven't been sleeping much myself. He sat at the table, watching her work. You could still leave. I'd understand. Is that what you want? What I want is for you to be free of fear. If that means leaving, it doesn't. Josephine shaped the dough into loaves with practiced hands. Running didn't free me from fear. It fed it. Every day I wondered when my past would find me. Well, now it has, and I'm still standing. Josephine. No, let me finish. She wiped her floury hands on her apron and sat across from him. You told me you love me, but you haven't asked how I feel. Wade's hands stilled on the table. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready. Or not tell me, if that was your choice. That's just like you, she said softly. Patient, generous, never demanding more than I could give. She reached across the table, covering his weathered hands with hers. I love you, Wade Rourke, not for your protection or your ranch or what you could give me. I love you for seeing me whole when I was broken, for giving me space to mend, for standing beside me now when running would be easier. Wade turned his hands to capture hers. Then why do you look so sad? Because loving you makes this harder. If it were just me facing Marcus's threats, I could bear it. But I've brought trouble to your door, to the town that's been nothing but kind. Our door, Wade corrected. And our town? You're not separate from us anymore. Josephine, what touches you touches all of us. A knock at the door interrupted them. Wade answered it, hand instinctively moving to where a rifle would hang. But it was only Dr. Murphy, looking tired and travel-worn. Sorry for the late hour, the doctor said. Just got back from the Sawyer place. Heard about the trouble with that Del Mare fellow. Come in, Doc, Wade said. Coffee? Please. The doctor settled at the table. accepting the cup Josephine poured. "I've been thinking about that day you set young Sam's leg. You mentioned your mother was a midwife." "Yes," Josephine said cautiously. "She delivered half the babies in our neighborhood back in Kansas City." "Ever assist her?" "Many times. She taught me about herbs, birthing, treating fevers. Said women needed to know healing arts, especially poor women who couldn't afford doctors." "Doctor," Murphy leaned forward, "I'm getting old. Miss Calder, this territory's growing, and I can't reach everyone who needs help. I could use an assistant, someone to handle the simpler cases, especially among the women who'd prefer another woman's care." Josephine's breath caught. "You're offering me work. Paying work. Respectable work. Work that would make you essential to this community." The doctor's eyes were kind but calculating. Hard for a town to let someone arrest a woman who might deliver their grandchildren. "Doc," Wade said slowly, "are you suggesting—" "I'm suggesting nothing improper." "Doctor," Murphy said firmly, "Miss Calder has demonstrated natural healing ability. With proper training, she could be a real asset. I've written to the Territorial Medical Board about apprenticeship programs for midwives and nurses, all perfectly legal and above board." I don't know what to say," Josephine managed. "Say yes," the doctor said simply. "Start tomorrow. Bring that dress you're so worried about. We'll put it to good use making bandages. About time something good came from Del Mar." After the doctor left, Josephine sat stunned. "Did that really happen?" "Doc Murphy doesn't make offers lightly. Wade said he sees something in you, same as the rest of us do." The third day dawned bright and cold. Josephine dressed carefully in her brown wool dress, pinned her hair severely back, and tried not to think about what Marcus Whitfield might do when he arrived to find no money waiting. She went to Dr. Murphy's office early, where he set her to organizing supplies and reading medical texts. "Knowledge is armor," he said. "Arm yourself well." By noon, the waiting was unbearable. Main Street seemed unusually busy, townsfolk finding reasons to linger near the general store and sheriff's office. Josephine tried to concentrate on the anatomy text before her, but the words blurred. "He's here," someone called from the street. Through the window, Josephine saw Marcus Whitfield riding in, accompanied by two men who looked like hired muscle. Her heart hammered, but she forced herself to stand straight. "Stay inside." "Doctor," Murphy ordered, "let the men handle this." But Josephine was done hiding. She walked out onto the boardwalk, head high despite her trembling hands. Marcus dismounted with theatrical flair. "Miss Calder, I trust you have my money." "The dress is being put to good use," she said clearly. "Bandages for the doctor's office. If you want payment, you'll need to speak to the law." "The law?" Marcus smiled coldly. "How convenient. I brought my own legal representative." One of his companions stepped forward, producing a document. "Warrant for the arrest of Josephine Calder, sworn out in Del Mar for theft." The crowd murmured angrily. Sheriff Coleman, a fair-minded man who'd been watching from his office, stepped forward to examine the warrant. "Appears to be in order," he said reluctantly. "Though I don't like it." "Then do your duty." "Sheriff," Marcus demanded. "Now hold on," Wade said, pushing through the crowd. "That warrant's from Del Mar. Does it even have standing here?" "Territorial warrant," the legal man said smugly. "Valid anywhere in Nevada." Josephine felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. After everything, it would end like this, dragged back to Del Mar in chains, paraded as a criminal. "How much to make this go away?" Wade asked bluntly. Marcus named the same sum as before, then added, "plus interest, for my trouble." "You're a piece of work, Whitfield," someone called out. "I'm a man protecting family interests," Marcus replied smoothly. "This woman attempted to infiltrate decent society through deception. Who knows what she's planning here?" "I'll tell you what she's planning." Mrs. Garrett stepped forward, Sam at her side. She's planning to help birth babies and heal the sick. She's planning to mend clothes and cook meals and be a good wife to a good man. She saved my boarding house fund. Mrs., Morrison added, could have had that money paid to you, but she insisted it go to help me rebuild instead. She worked herself near to death these 3 days helping everyone but herself. Mrs., Henley chimed in. One by one, the townsfolk spoke up. Even taciturn Mr. Pemberton cleared his throat and said, "Credit to the community. Miss Calder is—" Sheriff Coleman looked at the warrant again, then at the crowd, then at Marcus. "Mr. Whitfield, I'm thinking there might be another solution here. The law is the law, Sheriff." True, but the law also allows for community service in lieu of jail time for nonviolent offenses. The sheriff's eyes glinted. "I'm proposing Miss Calder serve her sentence right here in Promise Creek. Say, 6 months of medical assistance with Doc Murphy. Helping our sick and injured seems fitting restitution for the alleged theft of one dress." "That's not," Marcus started. "It's that, or I examine this warrant real close." The sheriff continued. "Maybe telegraph Delmar. Ask some questions about the circumstances. Might even inquire whether the Whitfield family wants the whole story of a canceled wedding made public record in a trial." Marcus's face flushed. The scandal of a public trial, with Josephine able to tell her side, would damage the Whitfield reputation far more than her disappearance had. "This is highly irregular," the legal man protested. "Welcome to the territories," Sheriff Coleman said cheerfully. "We do things different out here." Marcus looked around at the hostile faces, calculated his options. "Very well," he said finally. 6 months community service. But if she leaves Promise Creek before then, the warrant becomes active again." "Agreed," the sheriff said before Josephine could speak. "I'll draw up the papers." As Marcus prepared to leave, he stopped near Josephine. "You think you've won," he said quietly, "but you'll always be the washwoman's daughter who reached too high. These people will tire of you. He'll tire of you," he added, glancing at Wade. "And when you're alone again, remember you brought it on yourself." "Mr. Whitfield," Wade said conversationally, "get on your horse and get out of our town. Don't come back." Marcus left with his men, dust swirling in their wake. The crowd began to disperse, people stopping to squeeze Josephine's shoulder or murmur support. 6 months, Josephine said to Wade when they were relatively alone. "I'm bound here for 6 months. "Is that such a hardship?" he asked gently. "No, but you didn't ask for a woman with legal troubles. You didn't ask for any of this. I asked you to stay." Wade reminded her, "Everything else is just details." That evening, Dr. Murphy made it official, drawing up apprenticeship papers that would document Josephine's service. "By the time 6 months are up," he said, "you'll have enough training to practice midwifery anywhere in the territory. That's freedom. Miss Calder, real freedom." As she and Wade rode home under a canopy of stars, Josephine felt the strangest sensation. It took her a moment to identify at peace. For the first time in her life, she wasn't running towards something or away from something. She was simply where she belonged. "Wade," she said as they neared the ranch. Marcus was wrong. About you getting tired of me. About them all getting tired of me. Course he was wrong." "How do you know?" Wade helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist. "Because, Josephine Calder, you're not someone a man gets tired of. You're someone a man builds a life with, if you're willing." "I'm willing," she said softly, "but I have 6 months of service to complete first." "Good thing I'm a patient man," Wade said, and kissed her there in the yard with Blue barking joyfully around them and the lights of their ranch, their home glowing warm in the windows. The weeks following Marcus Whitfield's departure fell into a rhythm that felt both new and eternal. Josephine rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Wade, then rode into town for her work with Dr. Murphy. Her afternoons were spent visiting patients, learning to mix medicines, and studying medical texts until the words swam before her eyes. "You're a natural." "Doctor," Murphy said one afternoon as Josephine successfully delivered her first baby, a healthy girl, to the Sawyer family. "Your mother taught you well." Josephine cradled the newborn briefly before passing her to the exhausted but beaming mother. "She always said healing was about more than knowledge. It's about caring enough to see what people need." That evening, Wade was waiting on the porch when she returned, as had become his custom. His face lit up when he saw her. "How'd it go?" "Perfect. A beautiful little girl. They named her Hope." Josephine sank onto the step beside him, tired but glowing with satisfaction. "Fitting name," Wade said, handing her a cup of coffee. "How are you feeling about next week?" Next week marked her 4th month of service and their planned wedding day. It would be a simple affair. Nothing like the grand spectacle she'd once imagined in Del Mar. Just them, the minister, and a few close friends. "I'm not nervous," Josephine said, then laughed. "That's a lie. I'm terrified." "Of marrying me?" "Of being happy," she admitted. "Every time I've reached for happiness, it's been yanked away. Part of me keeps waiting for something to go wrong." Wade set down his cup and took her hand. "Nothing's going wrong. Josephine, we're getting married. You're becoming the territory's best midwife, and we're building a life together. Simple as that." "Simple as that," she echoed, squeezing his hand. But 3 days before the wedding, complications arose from an unexpected source. Josephine was at the clinic, preparing medicines, when a woman entered elegantly dressed despite the dust of travel, with auburn hair and calculating green eyes. "I'm looking for Wade Rourke," the woman announced. Something in her tone made Josephine wary. "He's at the ranch. Can I help you? I'm his fiancée, Josephine Calder." The woman's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "Fiancée, how interesting. I'm Maribel Hampton, Wade's former fiancée." The words hit Josephine like cold water. Wade had never mentioned being engaged before. "I see he didn't tell you about me," Maribel continued, settling into a chair as if she owned the place. "We were engaged 5 years ago. I broke it off to marry a banker in San Francisco, recently widowed. I'm afraid." She didn't look particularly grieved. "I heard Wade was still unmarried and thought, well, perhaps we could rekindle what we had." "He's not unmarried," Josephine said firmly. "We're to be married in 3 days." "Are you?" Maribel examined her gloves with studied casualness. "How nice. Though I wonder, does Wade know about your past about Del Mar?" Josephine's blood chilled. "How do you—" "Oh, my dear, news travels. A friend wrote me about the scene with Marcus Whitfield, a runaway bride turned thief, and Wade's marrying you out of what pity, his overdeveloped sense of responsibility." Maribel stood, smoothing her skirts. "I'll be staying at the boarding house. Do tell Wade I'm in town. I'm sure he'll want to see me." She swept out, leaving Josephine feeling as if the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. All her old insecurities came flooding back. What if Maribel was right? What if Wade's feelings were mere obligation? What if faced with his elegant former love? He realized he'd made a mistake. That evening, Josephine could barely meet Wade's eyes at supper. "Doc Murphy said you did well with the Harrison boy's broken arm today," Wade said, trying to draw her out. "It was straightforward," she murmured, pushing food around her plate. "Josephine, what's wrong?" She looked up at him, then this good, honest man who'd given her everything. He deserved the truth. Maribel Hampton came to the clinic today. Wade's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully. "Maribel's in town. She said you were engaged once. We were 5 years ago. She left me for someone with more money and better prospects." His voice was neutral, but Josephine caught the old hurt beneath it. "She's widowed now, and she wants you back." Wade pushed back from the table and came around to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands. Josephine, look at me. She met his storm-gray eyes reluctantly. Maribel Hampton left me without a backward glance when something better came along. You know what she said? That I'd never amount to more than a small-time rancher. That she deserved more than calloused hands and sunrise chores. His hands tightened on hers. You've never once made me feel less than... You've worked beside me, believed in what we're building. Why would I want someone who only wants me now that I've proven successful? Because she's beautiful, elegant, everything I'm not. You're right, Wade said, and her heart sank. She is elegant. She's also cold, calculating, and wouldn't last a day doing the work you do. You delivered a baby today. Josephine, you've saved lives, mended bones, helped rebuild a community. Maribel wouldn't soil her gloves to help a neighbor. But, no buts. I loved her once. Or thought I did. Young man's foolishness. What I feel for you, it's deeper. It's partnership. It's respect and desire and friendship all woven together. It's real, Josephine. As real as anything I've ever known. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm being foolish. You're being human, after what you've been through. I'd be worried if you weren't a little scared. He stood, pulling her up with him. Come to town with me tomorrow. I need to make something clear to Maribel. The next morning, they went to the boarding house together. Maribel received them in the parlor, dressed in silk that probably cost more than Josephine's entire wardrobe. Wade, she purred. You look well. Ranch life suits you. Maribel. His tone was polite, but cool. I heard you were in town. I wanted to introduce you properly to my fiancé and make sure there are no misunderstandings. Oh, I think I understand perfectly. Maribel's eyes were sharp on Josephine. You've certainly chosen interestingly. I've chosen perfectly, Wade corrected. Josephine and I will be married in 2 days. You're welcome to attend if you're still in town, though I suspect you'll find better entertainment elsewhere. Wade, surely you can't, Maribel started. I can and I will, he interrupted. You made your choice 5 years ago. I've made mine now. I wish you well, Maribel, but there's nothing for you here. He turned to Josephine. Ready to go. We have wedding preparations to finish. As they left, Josephine heard Maribel call out, She'll disappoint you, Wade. Women like her always do. Wade paused at the door. The only disappointment I've ever had in a woman came from you, Maribel. Good day. Outside, Josephine found herself laughing through her tears. That was overdue, Wade said. I'm sorry. I should have told you about her. We all have pasts. What matters is the future. They spent the rest of the day finalizing wedding plans. Mrs. Henley had insisted on making Josephine's dress a simple but beautiful creation in cream wool with tiny pearl buttons. The church ladies were preparing a feast, even gruff Mr. Pemberton had offered his best buggy for their use. That evening, as Josephine worked on hemming her wedding dress, she thought about the white silk still folded in the trunk, the dress that had once represented all her dreams of elevation and escape. Tomorrow, she would cut it up for bandages as promised. It seemed fitting, transforming something that had brought her shame into something that could bring healing. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Wade answered it, and she heard Maribel's voice, lower and more desperate than before. Please, Wade, just hear me out. There's nothing to say. Maribel. I was wrong. I see that now. I was young and foolish and now you're widowed and need security again, Wade said, not unkindly, but firmly. I'm sorry for your loss. Truly. But I'm not your safety net. That's not Wade. We had something special. No, he said simply. We had something young and untested. The first storm that came, you ran. Josephine faced actual storms, literal and figurative. She didn't run. She stayed and fought and built. That's special. Maribel, that's lasting. There was silence. Then the sound of retreating footsteps. Wade closed the door and found Josephine standing in the doorway, needle and thread forgotten in her hands. "Did you mean that?" she asked softly. "Every word." He crossed to her, cupped her face in his calloused hands. "You're the strongest person I know?" Josephine called her. "In 2 days, you'll be Josephine Rourke, and I'll be the luckiest man in Nevada." "Only Nevada?" she teased through tears. "The whole territory. Hell, the whole country." That night, unable to follow the tradition of the groom not seeing the bride, they sat together on the porch, watching the stars and talking about their plans. The ranch would grow. Josephine would continue her medical training. Maybe children would come in time. "I want you to know," Josephine said quietly, "that I'm not marrying you for security or protection or because I have nowhere else to go. I'm marrying you because I love you, because you see me truly and somehow love me anyway." "Not anyway," Wade corrected. "Because of, I love your strength and your stubbornness. I love how you help without being asked. I love how you've made this house a home. I love how you look at sunrise when you're feeding the chickens and think, I don't notice. I love all of you. Josephine, the parts you're proud of and the parts you're still learning to forgive." They sat in comfortable silence until the cold drove them inside. Two people who'd found in each other not what they'd expected, but exactly what they needed. The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of bright blue sky that made the desert look like paradise. Josephine woke in the storage room for the last time, her wedding dress hanging on the back of the door like a promise. She'd barely slept, but it wasn't from nerves about marrying Wade. It was from the lingering echo of Maribel's words and the old fears they'd awakened. At the washstand, she studied her reflection, the face of a woman who'd walked through fire and emerged not unscathed, but stronger. "Mrs." Henley arrived early with 2 other church ladies to help her prepare. They fussed over her hair, pinning it up with small white flowers from Mrs. Garrett's garden. "You look beautiful, dear," Mrs. Henley said, stepping back to admire their work. "Like a woman who knows her own worth." "Do I?" Josephine asked softly. "More than when you first came here. Certainly. I remember that frightened girl at the general store. Sure, everyone would turn her away." Mrs. Henley squeezed her shoulders. "Look at you now, our midwife, our neighbor, Wade's heart walking around outside his body." The church was full when they arrived. It seemed all of Promise Creek had come to witness the marriage of their taciturn rancher and the woman who'd sewn herself into the fabric of their community. Josephine stood at the back, trembling slightly. When a hand touched her elbow, it was Dr. Murphy, dressed in his best suit. "Thought you might need someone to walk you down the aisle," he said gruffly. Thank you." Josephine's eyes misted. She'd planned to walk alone, another reminder of all she'd lost. But she wasn't alone anymore. As the organ began to play, she saw Wade at the altar, tall and steady in his black suit. His eyes found hers across the length of the church, and the love in them made her breath catch. This was real. This was happening. She was choosing love over fear. But halfway down the aisle, the church doors burst open. "Stop!" Everyone turned. Marcus Whitfield stood in the doorway, disheveled and wild-eyed. But it wasn't Marcus who made Josephine's blood freeze, it was the man beside him. Thomas, her former fiancé, the one who'd abandoned her at the altar, stood there in traveling clothes, his handsome face twisted with emotion. "Josephine!" Thomas called out. "Don't do this. I've come to make things right." The church erupted in murmurs. Wade started forward, but Josephine held up a hand, stopping him. This was her past to face. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the church. "You're interrupting my wedding. Again." "I was wrong," Thomas said, pushing past his brother. "I was a coward. Mother filled my head with talk of suitable matches and social position. But these months without you, I've been miserable. I love you. Josephine, I'll stand up to my family. We can start over. The irony of it, the very scene she'd once dreamed of, playing out at the worst possible moment. Josephine looked at Thomas, really looked at him. Saw the weak chin, the eyes that couldn't quite meet hers, the hands that had never known real work. Then she looked at Wade, patient. Strong Wade, who was letting her handle this in her own way, trusting her to choose. "No," she said simply. "Josephine, please." "No, Thomas. You offer me what you should have offered then, but only because you've suffered without me. Not because you've grown or changed, but because you're uncomfortable." She stepped closer to him, aware of the entire town watching. "I'm not the same woman you left at that altar. That woman was desperate to be something she wasn't. This woman knows exactly who she is." "You're making a mistake," Marcus interjected. "This cowboy can't give you what we can: social position, wealth, comfort. He's given me something worth more." Josephine interrupted. "He's given me respect, partnership, a place where my skills matter more than my bloodline, a love that doesn't depend on what others think." She turned to address the congregation, her voice growing stronger. "I came to Promise Creek with nothing but shame and a ruined dress. You took me in. You gave me work, purpose, dignity. You stood by me when my past came calling. I'm proud to be part of this community, proud to be marrying Wade Rourke, and no amount of money or promises can change that." "Josephine!" Thomas reached for her, but Sheriff Coleman stepped forward. "Gentlemen, you're disrupting a lawful ceremony. I'll ask you to leave, now." "This isn't over," Marcus hissed. "Yes, it is," Wade said, finally speaking. He'd moved to stand beside Josephine. "Solid as a mountain. Whatever claim you think you have, whatever hold you imagine it's done, leave now, or I'll help you leave." For a moment, violence trembled in the air. Then Thomas's shoulders slumped. "I truly did love you," he said quietly to Josephine. "No," she said, not unkindly, but firmly. "You loved the idea of me, the version you could shape into what you needed. Wade loves who I actually am." The Whitfield brothers left, their departure as dramatic as their entrance. The church slowly settled, people returning to their seats. Minister Harrison cleared his throat. "Well," he said with dry humor, "unless anyone else from the bride's past wants to make an appearance, perhaps we could continue." A ripple of laughter ran through the congregation, breaking the tension. Josephine looked at Wade. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize for them," he said softly. "Ready to get married?" "More than ready." The ceremony continued, and this time nothing interrupted. When Minister Harrison asked if anyone objected, the silence was profound. The town had made its choice, just as Josephine and Wade had made theirs. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Wade's kiss was gentle but sure, a promise and a claiming all at once. The church erupted in cheers, and Josephine found herself laughing against his lips. The reception in the church hall was a joyous affair. Tables groaned under the weight of food the townswomen had prepared. Jake Morrison had brought his fiddle, and soon couples were dancing on the cleared floor. "May I, Doctor?" Murphy appeared at Josephine's elbow, gesturing to the dance floor. "Of course," she said, letting her mentor lead her into a waltz. "I'm proud of you, girl," he said as they moved. "Not just for today, but for these past months. You've become quite the healer. I had good teachers, my mother and you. You had good instincts. All I did was help refine them." He smiled. "That was quite the scene earlier." "I'm sorry it disrupted." "Don't be. Showed everyone what you're made of. That Whitfield boy looked like he'd swallowed a lemon when you turned him down." The doctor chuckled. Wade looked ready to take him apart with his bare hands. But he didn't. He trusted me to handle it. "That's what good partners do." "Doctor," Murphy said, "trust each other, support each other, build each other up. You and Wade have that." as if summoned by his name. Wade appeared to claim the next dance, Doctor. Murphy handed her over with a paternal pat on the shoulder. "Hello, Mrs. Rourke," Wade murmured as they swayed together. "Hello, Mr. Rourke," she replied, the name feeling like a gift on her tongue. "Any regrets?" "Only that I didn't meet you sooner." They danced in comfortable silence, surrounded by the community that had become their family. Sam Garrett was sneaking extra cake while his mother pretended not to notice. Mrs. Henley was deep in conversation with Mrs. Morrison about the new boarding house. Even Mr. Pemberton had been coaxed onto the dance floor by his wife. "What are you thinking?" Wade asked. "That I'm happy," Josephine said wonderingly. "Truly, deeply happy. I didn't know it could feel like this." "Like what?" "Like coming home." As the evening wore on and the celebration continued, Josephine found a quiet moment to step outside. The desert stretched endlessly under the stars, the same desert that had nearly killed her months ago. Now it felt like a friend, vast and accepting. She heard footsteps and smiled without turning. "Escaping your own wedding reception." "Looking for my wife," Wade said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Can't seem to let her out of my sight today." "After the Whitfield entrance, I don't blame you." "That's not why—" He turned her in his arms. "I keep thinking I'll wake up and you'll be gone. That this is too good to be real." "It's real," she assured him, reaching up to touch his face. "We're real. This life we're building is real." "No more running. No more running, though." She smiled mischievously. "I might walk very quickly toward our future." Wade laughed, the sound rich and full. "I can work with that." They stood together in the starlight, two people who'd found each other against all odds. Inside, their community celebrated. Outside, the desert blessed them with its ancient silence. And in that moment, Josephine Rourke knew with bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, not because she'd settled for less than her dreams, but because she'd discovered dreams she hadn't known she was allowed to have. "Ready to go home?" Wade asked. "I am home," she said, and sealed the words with a kiss. The first months of marriage passed in a golden haze of ordinary miracles. Josephine woke each morning in the bed she now shared with Wade, no longer in the storage room but in the main bedroom as mistress of the house. She'd trace the morning light across his sleeping face and marvel that this was her life now, not the grand existence she'd once dreamed of, but something far more precious. Her work with Dr. Murphy continued, her skills growing with each passing week. She delivered 3 more babies that autumn, treated countless injuries, and even helped the doctor perform minor surgery on a ranch hand who'd been gored by a bull. The sight of blood no longer made her flinch. The weight of responsibility no longer made her doubt. "You've got the hands for this work, Doctor," Murphy told her one afternoon as she successfully stitched a deep wound. "Steady and sure. Your mother would be proud." It was a Tuesday in late November when the final test of her new life arrived. Josephine was at home, preparing medicine for the Garrett family's youngest, when she heard horses approaching, many horses, moving fast. Through the window, she saw them 5 riders, led by a man whose expensive clothes couldn't hide the hardness in his face. Behind him rode Thomas and Marcus Whitfield, along with 2 men who looked like hired guns. Her hand stilled on the medicine bottle. After months of peace, the past had come calling one last time. Wade was out with the cattle, wouldn't be back until evening. She was alone except for Blue, who growled low in his throat as the riders dismounted. Josephine stepped onto the porch. Rifle in hand, Wade had taught her to shoot over the summer. "Gentlemen," she said coolly, "you're on private property." The well-dressed stranger smiled, and it was like watching a snake uncoil. "Mrs. Rourke, I presume allow me to introduce myself. Harrison Whitfield, patriarch of the Whitfield family. I believe you're acquainted with my sons." Thomas wouldn't meet her eyes, but Marcus smirked. The 2 hired men flanked the porch. hands near their weapons. "What do you want?" Josephine asked, though she kept the rifle steady. "What I want, young woman, is to protect my family's reputation. You've made quite the spectacle abandoning one son, humiliating him before all of Delmar, then rejecting his generous offer of reconciliation in front of another town." Harrison's voice was cultured but cold. "That ends today." "There's nothing to end. I'm married, happily. Your son and I have no connection anymore." "On the contrary, you still possess something that belongs to us, the wedding dress. More importantly, you possess knowledge that could damage our standing. I'm here to ensure your silence." "My silence?" Josephine almost laughed. "About what? That your family valued money over love? That's hardly a secret." Harrison's face darkened. "I'm offering you a choice. Mrs. Rourke, accept this payment." He produced a leather pouch, heavy with coin, and signed this document swearing never to speak of your association with my family. "In return, we'll consider the matter of the dress resolved." "And if I refuse, then things become unpleasant for you, for your husband, for this little ranch you're so proud of." He gestured to the hired men. "Accidents happen in remote places. Cattle die, barns burn. Men who work alone meet with misfortune." Fear crawled up Josephine's spine, but anger burned hotter. "You're threatening us." "I'm explaining consequences," Harrison said smoothly. "Sign the paper, take the money, and we disappear forever. Refuse and, well..." Josephine looked at the document one of the men produced. It was full of legal language, but the essence was clear. She would never speak of the Whitfields, never return to Delmar, never damage their good name. "You came all this way," she said slowly. "Spent all this money on hired men just to silence a seamstress. What are you really afraid of, Mr. Whitfield?" Harrison's composure cracked slightly. "You were nothing, a nobody who nearly contaminated our bloodline. The story of Thomas's weakness has already spread too far. We won't have you adding to it." "His weakness," Josephine repeated. "Not mine." "Josephine." Thomas spoke for the first time. "Please, just sign it. Take the money and..." "Be bought." She turned on him. "Like you were bought by your family's expectations. No, Thomas, I won't be silenced. I won't be threatened. And I won't be ashamed anymore." She looked Harrison Whitfield in the eye. "I came to your town with nothing but hope. I left with nothing but shame. But that shame transformed into strength. Your money can't buy what I've built here. Your threats can't destroy what I've become." "You stupid girl." Marcus started forward, but stopped at the sound of approaching horses. Wade appeared over the ridge, but he wasn't alone. Sheriff Coleman rode beside him, along with Doctor, Murphy, Jake Morrison, and a dozen other men from town. They'd seen the strange riders, heard Blue's frantic barking carried on the wind. "Gentlemen," Sheriff Coleman said pleasantly, though his hand rested on his pistol. 5 armed men surrounding one woman. That doesn't look neighborly." "This is family business, Sheriff," Harrison said, but his confidence had wavered. "Mrs. Rourke's family is right here," Wade said, dismounting with dangerous grace. "And we don't take kindly to threats. We've made no threats." "I heard different." "Doctor," Murphy interrupted, "sound carries in the desert. Something about barns burning, cattle dying." The townsmen had spread out, effectively surrounding the Whitfield group. The hired guns looked nervous now, outnumbered and far from home. "This is ridiculous," Harrison blustered. "We came to resolve a simple matter." "It is resolved," Josephine said firmly. She tore the document in half, then quarters, letting the pieces scatter in the wind. "I owe your family nothing, not silence, not shame, not fear. The dress you're so concerned about, I used it for bandages, to help heal the sick. It's found better purpose than it ever would have in your world." She stepped down from the porch, moving to stand beside Wade. "You want to protect your reputation, then leave, now, and never come back, because if you threaten my husband, my home, or my community again, I'll make sure everyone from here to San Francisco knows exactly what kind of men the Whitfields really are. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Josephine's voice was steel. I've got nothing to lose and everything to protect. You've got everything to lose and nothing but pride to protect it with. Who do you think will fight harder? The standoff stretched taut as wire. Then Sheriff Coleman spoke. Mr. Whitfield, I'm going to offer you some free advice. Get on your horses and ride out. Don't stop until you're out of my jurisdiction. And if I hear of any accidents befalling anybody in this town, I'll know where to look. Harrison Whitfield's face was purple with rage, but he was beaten and knew it. This isn't over, he snarled. Yes, it is, Wade said quietly. Your son made his choice at that altar. Josephine made hers today. Both of them chose truth over comfortable lies. Maybe you should try it sometime. The Whitfields left then, their departure watched by half the town. As the dust settled, Josephine found herself shaking, delayed reaction setting in. You all right? Wade asked, pulling her close. I am now. She looked around at the men who'd come to their aid. Thank you, all of you. No thanks needed. Jake Morrison said gruffly, We look after our own. That evening, as the story spread through Promise Creek, Josephine sat with Wade on their porch. The rifle was back in its place, the ordinary peace of their life restored. But something had fundamentally changed. I'm free, she said wonderingly. Truly free. They have no hold over me anymore. You freed yourself, Wade corrected, standing up to them like that, refusing their money that took courage. I wasn't alone. She leaned into him. I had you. I had the town. I had something worth protecting. What happens now? Josephine considered this. Now I finish my training with Doc Murphy. We expand the ranch like we planned. Maybe start a family when the time's right. She smiled. I live my life without looking over my shoulder. I like the sound of that, Wade murmured against her hair. As the stars emerged one by one, Josephine thought about the woman who'd stumbled into the desert months ago, ready to die rather than face her shame. That woman was gone, transformed by love and work and community into someone stronger. Wade, she said softly. Remember what you said that first night, that nobody has the right to make me feel small? I remember. You were right, but more than that, you showed me I didn't have to let them. You gave me the space to grow tall again. His arms tightened around her. You were always tall. Josephine, you just needed reminding. She turned in his arms, kissing him with all the gratitude and love in her heart. When they broke apart, she was crying and laughing at once. Happy tears, she assured him. The happiest. They sat together as the desert night wrapped around them. Two people who'd built something unshakable from the ruins of their separate pasts. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, patience to tend, cattle to manage, a life to build together. But tonight, they were simply Wade and Josephine Rourke, complete in their love and secure in their place. No more running, Josephine whispered to the stars. No more hiding, Wade agreed. Just living, just loving. And in the vast silence of the desert, with the lights of Promise Creek twinkling in the distance and blue snoring at their feet, that was more than enough. It was everything. Josephine Rourke lifted her face to the sky, no longer bowed in shame but raised in quiet pride. She hadn't found the life she'd once wanted, she'd found the life she deserved. And it was beautiful. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Josephine and Wade's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it. Where are you listening from? Please comment below and let me know your thoughts about their story. I love connecting with listeners from around the world. If you enjoyed this tale of courage, redemption, and true love in the American frontier, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 for more authentic stories from this incredible era. Don't forget to like this video and hit the hype button to help more people discover these powerful stories of the Old West. Your support means everything and keeps these tales alive. Until our next adventure in the Wild West. Partners.